This video is brought to you by HonorFirst.com, a nonprofit organization. I'm Clifford Gill, a retired assistant chief and one of its officers. Reflecting on our history, we recall the powerful words written on June 3, 1929, by Chief Patrol Inspector Herbert Horsley to the parents of Patrol Inspector Benjamin Hill. He wrote, "We want you to know that our son's name will go down in Border Patrol history as a martyr to the cause of justice and as an example of fearlessness in the enforcement of the laws of our country." These words captured the spirit of a young 5-year-old organization still defining its identity. They expressed admiration, gratitude, and respect for those who served, and set the tone for how the U.S. Border Patrol sought to honor its fallen. But as time passed and policies changed, recognition did not always keep pace with sacrifice. Some employees who died in the line of duty were not formally recognized at the time of their deaths. Their stories faded into quiet corners of history, waiting for someone to bring them back into the light. This video is dedicated to them, the unrecognized but never forgotten. Throughout the patrol's long history, several deaths met the criteria for line of duty recognition but were overlooked because standards were unofficial or different, or that documentation was incomplete, or the significance of events was not understood at the time. As historical research expanded, many of these omissions were discovered and corrected. One of the earliest cases was Patrol Inspector James F. Mankin, who died in 1924 when a government rifle accidentally discharged. His death occurred in the performance of his duties, yet it would take 3 years, until 1927, for him to be formally recognized. His case became one of the first examples of a sacrifice temporarily lost in the administrative gaps of a growing organization. Another case took far longer. In 1927, Patrol Inspector Orin F. was killed by friendly fire during a stakeout. His death clearly met the standard for line of duty recognition, but nearly a century passed before the historical record was re examined and corrected. In 2023, 96 years after he fell, his sacrifice was finally acknowledged. In 1944, Garvis Field Harrell suffered a fatal heart attack while engaged in a foot pursuit. His death met the criteria for recognition, but it was never granted during his lifetime or in the decades that followed. Only in 2025, more than 80 years later, was his service finally honored. More recent examples remind us that this issue did not only affect the earliest generations. In 1995, Agent Lawrence B. Pierce lost his life while intervening to protect a woman during an off duty incident. He displayed courage and selflessness, but his death was not recognized as line of duty until 23 years later, in 2018. In 2014, Agent Javier Vega Jr. was killed while defending his family in another off duty incident. After review, his death was formally recognized in 2016. Though the delay was short compared to earlier cases, his story reinforces an important truth: recognition matters, whether delayed by months or decades. These corrections illuminate a larger historical reality. In recent years, individuals who served before the Border Patrol officially existed, such as the Mounted Watchman, also known as the Mounted Guard, have been included among the honored dead. Their inclusion reflects respect for the lineage and foundations of the patrol. Yet at the same time, some who did serve in the patrol waited years or even generations before receiving recognition. This contrast highlights how institutional history evolves, how standards change, and why careful research is essential. Recognition is not simply about placing a name on a memorial. It is about honoring service, preserving truth, and ensuring that families know their loved one's sacrifice has been fully understood and acknowledged. Correcting historical oversights does not rewrite the past, it completes it. But recognition has not always been consistent. Across different eras, similar circumstances sometimes led to very different outcomes. These differences do not diminish anyone's service. They simply reveal how policies, interpretations, and historical context shaped memorial decisions over time. Understanding these comparisons helps us see the larger picture: how recognition evolved, how standards shifted, and why documenting these stories is essential. Let's look at a few of the most meaningful examples. Agent Gigax's unrecognized death as compared to the recognized deaths of Agents Barraza, De La Osa, and Williams. Border Patrol agent John Charles Gigax died on November 7, 1999, in a government vehicle while detailed to Washington, D.C. His accident occurred in Virginia, far from his home station in Laredo, Texas. Yet, despite the circumstances of his death being significantly similar to other agents' recognized deaths, his name has not been included on CBP or Border Patrol memorials. However, his sacrifice is recognized on the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, thanks in large part to the determined efforts of Chief Patrol Agent John Montoya. Years later, in 2016, Border Patrol agent Jose Daniel Barraza was killed near Sierra Blanca, Texas, in a vehicle accident while commuting home after his shift. Unlike Agent Gigax, his name was added to the CBP Valor Memorial. These two cases, similar in many ways, received different recognition outcomes, and when we look deeper, we see more examples of this contrast. In 1998, senior patrol agents Jesus de la Osa and Thomas J. Williams were killed in a collision while traveling on duty during a detail assignment. Their names are included on CBP memorials, reflecting another interpretation of eligibility that differed from Agent Gigax's case. Together, these four examples highlight how evolving criteria resulted in different outcomes for agents lost under similar circumstances. Their stories underscore why consistency in recognition matters and why historical documentation is so important. A similar pattern appears in another set of cases. Let us compare how the deaths of Agents Hogue and Aurigema were not recognized while the death of Agent White was. In 1995, Border Patrol agent Joe R. White died of a heart attack while working the IH-35 checkpoint near Laredo, Texas. His distinguished service, including major narcotics seizures as a canine handler, is honored on the CBP Valor Memorial. 14 years later, in 2009, Border Patrol agent John A. Hogue III collapsed and died while working the Highway 95 checkpoint near Quartzsite, Arizona. Like Agent White, he suffered a fatal medical emergency while actively performing his duties. But unlike Agent White, Agent Hogue's name has not been added to CBP or Border Patrol memorials. Agent Hogue was a 6-year veteran of the patrol, a former U.S. Army soldier, and a former Virginia police officer, a lifetime dedicated to public service. Most recently, in 2023, Border Patrol agent Alan Aurigema passed away from a coronary blockage while on duty, in uniform, and operating a marked Border Patrol vehicle. The remote location delayed the discovery of the medical emergency, adding to the heartbreak of his loss. As of now, his name has not yet been included on CBP or Border Patrol memorials. These three cases, White, Hogue, and Aurigema, mirror one another in cause and circumstance, yet not in recognition. Their stories remind us that historical context, policy changes, and administrative interpretations all play a role in determining eligibility. And then there is the death of Border Patrol pilot Howard H. Gay. On October 3, 1990, near Marfa, Texas, pilot Gay saw a stranded motorist while driving to work through heavy fog. Attempting to turn around to help, as any servant leader would, he was struck and killed by another vehicle. For his bravery, the same act in which he lost his life, the Immigration and Naturalization Service awarded him the Newton Azraq Award, its highest recognition for heroism. In 1991, his widow, Linda, accepted the award on his behalf. Yet, despite receiving the agency's highest honor for valor, Pilot Gay's death has not been classified as line of duty, and his name does not appear on CBP's Valor Memorial. His case shows how award criteria and memorial criteria have not always aligned, and why documenting these stories matters. These comparisons do not question the worthiness of anyone's service. Every one of these individuals lived and died in service to the United States. Instead, these examples give us historical clarity. They remind us that recognition standards have evolved and that individual determinations were often shaped by the policies, documentation, and interpretations of their time. By preserving these stories, we help ensure that history remains complete, consistent, and truthful. HonorFirst.com gratefully acknowledges the Border Patrol Museum and historian Joseph Banco. Their historical materials and our long-standing partnership continue to enrich our shared efforts to preserve the proud legacy of the U.S. Border Patrol.